Hey guys, it's me again. A lot of you guys seem to show interest in my last video, which has inspired me to make more content. So this time I'll be looking at all RGL invite matches from week 2A. Credit to Bethnix for the video idea, and if you guys fuck with this shit, let me know and maybe I'll make it a weekly series depending on, how many matches get delayed and how well this performs, because I'm not gonna lie, this shit takes a fuck ton of time to do. Going through demos is just a pain in the ass, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, this current week, we didn't have matches between Global Can and Palace Cats, which is part of week 2A. It seems to have been delayed, so if this does become a series, I'll likely just do more accelerated recaps of delayed matches in addition to the week that I'm covering. So I'm also going to be doing a player of the game and a player of the week type shit, just for fun, as well as like my personal power rankings on a week by week basis. Also, to those of you guys asking me for the stats in my previous video, I will link them in the description, as well as the logs from the matches I cover in today's video. So now, without further ado, let's get into this. So for our very first match, we have Froyotech versus Fjord Gaming. After a small stalemate, Deadly Seed catches out Logan, whom Alexandros finishes off alongside both Patty and Hubert. So already big plays on the first mid, after which Habib tries to go for a salvage but gets arrowed by his target Bear in Valley. Pineapple hits a nice rocket onto Benny to open up some space for his team and pushes him a Froyo off plat, but Alexandros beeps the jump in Valley that would normally have given him the chance to sack the mid. Habib leaves second too late as Fjord pop Uber and claim Froyo second. Then, on Froyo's last, Hubert gets pressured back to spawn by Alexandros, which helps Fjord win the round, as, once Hubert could get Uber, the point was just capped already. Moving on to the second mid, Hubert immediately gets dead off a pretty easily noticeable sticky trap, which gets called by no one, making it a 5v6. But Froyo played pretty aggro, cornering Fjord into Cafe, where Banny and Logan dish out insane damage, and a demo picked to seal mid for them. Though Fjord have massive Uber ad, but Laz has really good positioning to get a really sneaky pick on a Bear, and Alexandros does try to exact revenge onto Hubert in their Cafe, but is unable to do so. Froyo frag out with their Uber push on the last. Deadly Seed tries to save the point on Pudis to no avail. Coming into the third mid, both Fjord soldiers fall really early, going for a double bomb onto Hubert, which is unsuccessful, though Alexandros nearly pulls it off. Bear plays way too close to Froyo, allowing Banny to hit a fat rocket onto him, which he gets cleaned up by Patty. On Fjord's last, Froyo used from upper lobby, and while they don't get a kill with the Uber, Habib baits the cap and Hubert hits a really nice flash onto him to save him from a double soldier bomb, effectively helping secure the round. And then you start noticing the momentum going as Froyo just have a really nice fourth mid. Logan arrives to mid early, and him and Patty deal amazing damage to Alexandros, cratering him, and he gets just some crazy stickies onto him. However, Fjord, they do get the trade onto Banny, but Froyo play their health and wipe Fjord to take their second. Logan hits a really nice pipe onto Alexandros to allow Habib to clean him up before he can retreat to last. Froyo uses again from upper. They get the gun down quick but aren't able to really get any frags with the Uber again, but then holy fucking shit, Laz just comes in so clutch and he deals so much damage to Alexandros, Bear, and I think Necro on a bomb, which it just allows Patty and Logan to clean up and then cap with ease. I think this is where things start to slow down a little. On the fifth mid, Yosh and Logan, they have a little quickie bomb snipe off and they do really good damage on each other. Banny tries to bomb on enemy Tetris, but gets nothing of value and dies. Though Laz does get some good damage on Yosh, and he does get him picked off, but Fjord are just too healthy and force Froyo to their last. Froyo are able to manage to keep Fjord away from their last point, and Pineapple has a really weird gamer moment and just throws his life away for no apparent reason, when the call obviously seemed to just to be get the fuck out of lobby. Fjord decided to run crits through Valley, and after listening to comms thanks to Habib's stream, I kind of find it funny that you hear Banny say he thinks they're running Uber.
We confirm if they're on crits or not?
I think it's Uber.
Then Habib just instantly gets crit stickied. Banny manages to slow down momentum by getting behind through Cafe and winning a 1v1 against a healthy Deadly Seed, while Fjord caps Froyo second, which is surely taken back with the risk of Froyo having Uber ad. Banny doesn't get chased and he does stay behind for some time, even staying out of view from a scout coming out of forward spawn. Yosh spams Froyo's choke with stickies. Habib clears all but one, which he clearly saw, doesn't call it out to Hubert, and then Hubert gets dead and taken to half HP and forced. Meanwhile, Patty stops a backhack attempt from Alexandros and wins an exchange with him. I swear Banny calls to beware upcoming crits through choke multiple times, especially trying to get the point across to Hubert.
Beware the crits, they're gonna have it now, they're gonna have it now. They're gonna crits now, they're gonna crits now. They're gonna crits, they're gonna crits, beware. Just beware.
I know Banny can be a dick, and I know it was uncalled for, with how he talks to his players from time to time, but I can understand his frustration. Yeah, he conveyed his points in a mean dickish way, But if you look past that on like how he said what he said, his points do stand. They do make sense. Like I can totally understand his points. Shortly after, Benny gets some crazy damage onto the demo and both scouts, and after he dies, Patty gets the attention of Fjord so that Laz can flank through Cafe into choke, and he does so successfully, getting a good pick onto the demo and massive damage onto the mid and scout. Froyo spawners do come in, allowing them to hold on to mid while Bear is about to get crits again. With Froyo on their own last with equal Ubers, I guess slash crits, they use out of lobby and Habib gets a drop on a Bear before he can use, and Froyo push Fjord back to mid. A stalemate breaks out until Alexandros goes for a sack and gets nothing of value, but later gets traded out with Laz. And Patty gets behind in Valley, which actually gets Bear cornered and forced by Logan. Froyo counterpop and shortly after lose mid, and Habib nearly gets caught attempting to feed. Another stalemate between mid and Froyo second takes place until Alexandros breaks the silence again by attempting a set onto Hubert through Valley, which he actually nearly pulls off. Pineapple nearly picks off Banny and Cafe, but gets saved by Habib. Up 2 players, Froyo pushed to mid. Laz gets good damage on a Yosh on a high bomb, and Logan does get a force on a Bear. And at first, I thought Hubert was also forced, but it turns out he was just too forward. Like he was way too far forward, and he like fear popped essentially, granting Fjord a salvage play that they didn't even deserve to get. With no one really watching Valley, Alexandros manages to jump through and pass second and get a clean air shot kill onto Hubert just outside forward spawn. This dude's a beast. Fjord managed to get on point in the nick of time before a round reset, and Banny and Laz, they get really good damage onto the meta and demo, along with the pick, allowing them to get their respawns in time. But Habib just takes his sweet time building his sentry, and by the time like he does, it's in the wrong spot and instantly gets pistoled down. Shortly after, Fjord pushed with Uber and they win the round. On the 6th mid, Koyo quickly established a player advantage and used that as momentum to try to get some potentially caught players on Fjord second. Instead, what happens though is Deadly Seed plays some serious spy scout and he manages to hide on the tower from all 5 remaining Froyo players. And he gets 3 nice shots onto Hubert, which gets him down to just a few HP, where he gets cleaned up by a sticky snipe. Froyo do still manage to cap mid, but lose it quickly to Fjord, who pop and run Froyo into second by Valley. Alexandros diffs Patty in a 1v1 in Valley, and then gets the pick onto Hubert again. Patty actually calls it a little late in my opinion, and regardless, no one, demo nor med, is even looking at Valley to counter, though, you know, there's just so much pressure coming in from choke. Froyotech moved back to last, and Habib has another hiccup with the sentry, building it earlier this time, but still having it in the wrong place where it's susceptible to spam, where it swiftly gets cleaned up by Yosh. With only a level 1 gun and an Uber disad, Froyo gets boxed into spawn, and while Laz does stop the cap momentarily, it isn't enough to draw Fjord's players back, and they win another round by keeping Froyo at bay. On the 7th mid, the momentum we saw earlier from Froyotech seems to just spontaneously come back. Laz gets an early mid pick, and Pineapple tries to do the same thing, but he isn't remotely close to doing so. And with the Uber ad, Froyo pick up another round, seemingly picking up the momentum, which is just dead wrong because the next round is the longest round by far. Like where things just start to slow down again. And on this last mid, Froyo, they do get the mid, but at the cost of losing their med. Fjord then reclaim mid, and Alexandros gets another force onto Hubert at second, and Fjord pop into second, but aren't able to get too far as Froyo find a couple of frags to slow them down. With the help of Habib, Froyo reclaim their second as well as mid, and they pop onto Fjord's second, collecting several frags, and just as it looks like they're about to cap last, both the respawners and Bear's Uber come in and they push Froyo back out. Where Froyo and Fjord go back and forth with capping Fjord second, and Froyo fail yet another last push, which sets Fjord to finally claim mid again, and Froyo second, with Alexandros finding yet another med pick to wipe Froyo. Where it looks like Fjord are about to collect another round, they aren't able to pick up anything with Uber, and Froyo clean house and pick up mid and get a much needed back cap on second to draw Fjord away from capping mid. Though Deadly Seed does actually get a nice headshot on Benny, I must note. Fjord do manage to cap their second back, and Alexandros gets a sick fucking force on Hubert, which I thought and he thought would have been a kill. But that's the last point they ever cap, as Banny clutches the entire map and goes as spy in back caps. He pulls a classic EU gimmick on them, and that wins them the map 5-3. Looking at the logs, you immediately notice that Habib top fragged and top assisted for a damage class. For the amount of dominance he was asserting, he had a lot of deaths in my opinion, mainly due to feeding and poor decision making. As for Patty, he didn't really catch my eye too much outside getting a sizable amount of med picks. Though from what I remember, most of his crucial picks were essentially just cleanouts from other players putting in most of the work and damage. Benny definitely had the best performance on his team. He had a really good soldier stat line, second in damage across the entire board between both teams, and obviously the icing on the cake for Benny is he literally had the game-winning back cap on the most stalemate round by far, where they were having their hardest time trying to push last. So definitely clutch right there. Despite winning, Froyo's med had more deaths than Bear. Bear had better situational awareness, you know, he played better. Though, to be fair, a lot of Hubert's deaths, they could be blamed for poor communication, particularly from Habib, who also unironically was the one who would happen to have the beam on a majority of his deaths. And while we're on the subject of Habib, I feel like, yeah, he top fragged the map and he top damage on Scout, but I feel like he had a lot of deaths he probably could have avoided better. And like, for example, round 5 not calling to go to Shutter with his med, who, you know, he just assumes dungeon and they both just get rolled. Like, he doesn't make a call. And he also supposedly knew a Scout was missing at one point when Deadly Seeds was on tower hiding. Apparently he knew about it, but he decided to go into second through choke before even dealing with the Scout problem first. He has that pickup where he's not building his sentry in time, putting it, you know, into open of a spot that's easily spammable. He builds a sentry, you know, earlier next time, but still has it in the open. And of course, all of his beefing throughout the match, you know, you just can't forget that. You can see it in the demo, but you can see it even better in full effect on his stream VOD. I'm not going to really pick on Laz and Logan too much. I feel like they played their roles near flawlessly. Nothing to really say much there. And I'm not going to go too nitty gritty on the players on Fjord, but I will say who stood out the least for me, or I guess the most in a bad sense, was Pineapple. He beefed a lot of jumps. He beefed his first 2 rollouts in a row. He beefed some upper lobby jumps, some of which cost him his life. He had, you know, a lot of game sense issues too, particularly when he just jumps into lobby for no particular reason. When the call was just to leave. But I think ultimately what set Froyo apart from Fjord was that Froyo were winning majority of their mid fights, and 80% of the time that they won the mid fight, they won the round. Though obviously Froyotech have a lot they need to work on, specifically with communication and having all teammates be on the same page. That's definitely a big project they're gonna have to work on, and some adjustments that Benny has already made is putting himself back on Pocket Scout and Habib on Soldier. And I feel like this is gonna be a better adjustment because Habib has had more experience playing Soldier, at least from what I've seen, and you know, looking at his Soldier playstyle, I feel like he plays a better Soldier than Scout. Anyways, the player of this game for me, it was Alexandros. It was close between Benny and Alexandros, but ultimately I went with Alexandros. Is this a controversial pick because his team lost? Yeah. Should it be? Absolutely not. I can make the comparison that LeBron was the best player on the court in all of his finals losses to Golden State, save for maybe 2017. And even though he lost them all, we can still acknowledge he's the greatest there. Anyways, back to TF2. Outside of Banny, Alexandra stood out better than anyone to me. He contributed to over a third of his team's med picks with 5, and it was second most in demo picks on his team, and he was so good at living in so many moments. He had the best Soldier style line by a pretty sizable margin with less heals than both Banny and Pineapple, and while Banny had, you know, way better value metrics in DPM and assists, Alexander's made up for it in sheer value of kills, securing 5 times as many med kills and twice as many or more air shots than anyone else in the match. And while Yosh also put up a good stat line, what Alexandros did for Soldier was far more impressive than what Yosh did on med, in my opinion, and this isn't even counting the stats that you don't see in the logs, most notably in med forces. Like, I swear every time Huber got forced, it was Alexandros to blame. So yeah, that gets the first match out of the way. Jiminy versus Ninjago on Sultry, which was actually Jiminy's pick. Right out the get-go, Ninjago quickly lose their med, and a common theme you'll see with these lower invite teams is a lack of coordination. That very first med pick at the very first round, Nomad literally sees Zam flanking from under the point and does nothing about it. I obviously don't have access to comms, so I don't know if he communicated it to someone else and expected them to do something about it, or I don't know. Anyways, once that mid wraps up, both Moby and Hami do manage to get behind, but fail to get the med and die. On last with Uberad, Jiminy have trouble damaging Ninjago's players who play really far back and avoid almost all damage from the combo. And shortly after this, Ninjago reclaims mid, making good use of their Uber, allowing them to push Jiminy second. But it just goes downhill from there, where Ninjago's mid makes the questionable play of jumping into fire by 3 to 4 Jiminy players instead of just backpedaling with this scout. Jiminy get pushed to their second and then quickly to their last, where Uberad gives the first round to Jiminy. Though I will say Speedy gets Kobe killed by not keeping him flashed, and then Kobe dies from stickies on the point he was trying to clear. Other than that, flawless push. Anyways, next mid, Logai diffs Alex hard enough to force the team to play back more, and Sai gets behind and seen by Moby, and Moby is then shot at and hit by Sai, and no one looks back, like no one looks behind him. None of the team look behind to see Sai, and Sai's like, you know, what the fuck, he had to do like a double check there because on God, he thought he was cooked. He thought they saw him. And while Ninjago is capping mid, Sai bombs from behind and gets 3 sick frags on both the mid and both scouts. And he still manages to get away with getting a 4th frag on a Nomad after that fiasco. And shortly after, Kaza tries to salvage the play with the med pick, but he fails it. The first last push this round from Jiminy fails even with Uberad. They get really no value kills, and Ninjago get enough time to counter Uber. Kobe dies, his stickies on point again, this time well aware of them. Sai bombs to the spawn door during the chaos and scene. He does get a sneak kill on Hami, essentially making it a 3v2, and they cap. Though Ninjago should have been on the point at least, and I feel like they should have committed more instead of just flat out seemingly giving up. On the third mid, Alex once again gets diffed until Moby comes on the flank and commits to kill Lol guy, but he drops him to like 30 HP, and then the last second he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm good. I'm just gonna turn around and retreat. Like, bro, you're already in that deep, just commit, finish the job. I feel like he should have just followed through with that. Anyways, Jiminy decides to fully collapse and commit onto Ninjago. Both soldiers bomb on the tower and to just corner and absolutely fuck up the mid and combo. Nomad almost salvages the play though by getting behind, and he actually spoons Kobe and nearly gets one on the med, but he misses and gets cleaned up by Sai. On Ninjago's second, Ninjago initiate aggression due to ad. Sai guy bombs in and gets forced onto the med. And Sai actually gets flung into the air, and the whole damn team decides to look and like marvel at him all the way in the sky, and they don't notice Zam getting behind, killing the demo in the process. Still on Ninjago second, Finman pops a really bad Uber to save, you know, Hami, which forces them to kind of just salvage and push mid, and they just get juggled pushing through Joke, and its speedy is just way too far back anyways. Ninjago are able to get to mid, but they quickly lose their grips as Jiminy get back to mid and get better spacing and positioning, and force Ninjago to their second with Uber ad, where it's kind of like a stalemate for a little bit, and then both soldiers pressure from the flank and destroy, just like racking up damage. And Sai gets another good demo pick and some nasty directs, and the whole team just collapses on Ninjago and forces for Finman again. On Ninjago's last, Sai gets another demo pick with his Uber, and Finman just gets caught. I think it's just due to lack of, you know, top invite game sense and mechanics. You know, a lot of times you just see Finman just making like weird decisions and getting caught and dying. On the fourth mid, Ninjago's mid, he eats up so much spam that he has to get pack, leaving the demo and combo to just soak up damage without heals. And Alex sees and forgets about Zam on the flank, and as a result, his positioning is just bad and too far from the med and combo, and he dies while Jiminy just goes straight to last and has Zam cap second. They go in with Uber and bomb 5 men in, but Ninjago counter pop and push to mid, but Logai just juggles the entire team and cheese to stop them from getting onto Speedy. Jiminy push to mid and get more picks. Ubers are exchanged with equal players, and Ninjago, they just like pretend to run away through cheese, and then they just turn around and try to catch Jiminy by surprise by, you know, rushing a scout and soldier sack, but they're just not successful. Capping second is a breeze for Jiminy due to the player ad, and they pressured Ninjago to last. Sai overextends, as he does from time to time, and you know, he dies by getting caught, and Ninjago are they able to hold off last with help of Moby on the Putis up until Yike gets a good force onto Finman. Jiminy counter pop, Finman gets separated and killed by Sai, and you know, without any heals on the point, Ninjago loses the round. Now on the last mid is just absolute chaos and destruction from Jiminy. Sai gets a med pick immediately. Jiminy barely loses players while Ninjago, you know, they just get pushed straight to last. And by the way, at this point Ninjago, they're just running crits. Ninjago, they manage to hold off Jiminy's last push and stay alive and push to mid with the crits. But they only get one kill as Jiminy managed to pull off to their second, and you know, Alex does almost get a crit sticky on a Speedy, you know, close but no cigar, and they actually set up to defend mid. Jiminy pops Uber, which gets no kills, but post Uber they frag, and Laga gets picked on both the soldiers. Sai kind of just goes full Mimi too. He goes on the base jumper, he just gets a little Mimi, which, you know, gets him easily sniped by Hami. And at this time they're still running the crits and they have Uber ready, and this last seems to like take the longest out of this whole match, but you know, at the end of the day, Jiminy pulled through and they win that 5th round. And looking at the logs of this match, they kind of just show what I expected. Sai guy had the highest soldier DPM, he had the best KD. Nomad seemed to be like the weakest link this match for Ninjago. He went just 6 and 24 for all 5 rounds. I feel like Ninjago, they need to play more consistently with their game plan. It seemed like they were just all over the place in so many facets. It seemed like sometimes they were just kind of doing their own things, and you know, sometimes they play more aggressive when they had Uber dis ad, and sometimes they decide to just park the bus on last when they have Uber dis ad. Sometimes they just spontaneously make decisions. Also their medic just at so many times made so many bad decisions. Definitely a game sense issue. As for Jiminy, you know, they played well for the most part, but I do think, you know, there's still some room for improvement. Kobe, you know, transitioning on a scout, he had some game sense problems. You know, from time to time I would see him turning corners blindly, just jumping through corners. Like I saw this so many times, you know, instead of looking for stickies or hidden players. He kind of just went in a little too confidently sometimes. Fortunately, he didn't get killed by that a lot, but you know, you never know, and you don't want to carry that type of behavior like into the playoffs, and he would go for, like, in my opinion, unnecessary trades, or like, you know, when he sees stickies on the point, he gets gutted by them, try to clear them. One time he was too close to an Uber combo when he should have just been going to last, you know, shit like that. There's even a couple odd moments with Zam too, you know, where he sees the roamer going around to kill the med and he doesn't chase. I remember actually seeing him getting the soldier super low, and he's going through cheese trying to force, you know, or drop onto speedy, and they have like all the time in the world to prevent it from happening. Again, I don't know if it's a comm issue or what, but you know, Nomad actually manages to force speedy when he had, you know, no right doing so if Jiminy properly communicated. So I don't know, sometimes I feel like Kobe has, you know, a soldier mindset in him still from all these like seasons playing pocket, but outside some inconsistencies here and there, his game has translated really well. His DM is really fucking good, top invite, you know, as expected. Although I do think that the player of the game was definitely Psy Guy. He got a lot of damage on so many bombs. He had so many good moments, so many clutch moments. He actually had the second most demo picks on the map. He had the most med picks. He definitely showed up this game. You know, he did have some moments where he would feed, or moments where I was saying, oh, is he gonna feed, what's he gonna do, and then, you know, he decides to just retreat back. But I think that's just something that's kind of just ingrained in his mind, and that's just something that they're going to have to deal with. But when Psy Guy's not feeding and not you know, making weird decisions, he's playing really well, he's getting a lot of damage. That's what matters. So yeah, he is player of the game in my eyes. And the last match of week 2A was Mama's Boys versus Anglerfish on Snake, which was Mama's pick, so it was them playing at home. As of recording this match was yesterday, and this time around Jay replaced bot mod on Scout, so they're trying something different, something new, and this definitely makes them a much more Scout heavy team in my opinion. And bot mod's still a very formidable soldier to play with, so I do think that in a lot of different aspects, this team might actually be better with this composition. As you might expect, this one was also a sweep. Mama's Boys just blew this team 5-0 in literally 10 minutes time. It was so swift and easy that you had people memeing by the third round. Nevertheless, they was still somewhat watchable up until the last round or two. Jumping into the first mid, Mig rolls out faster, getting him to mid first. Damage is exchanged right away, and you know, right away you just start to see mistakes being made on the side of Anglerfish. If you got Tristan beefing 2 jumps within like 5 seconds, you know, trying to bomb the med, you know, he doesn't get any distance, which forces him to spam from his roof. He then gets diffed by Caps, but his medic, who by the way is under no real pressure, just decides not to arrow him for whatever reason, forcing him to, you know, to get back in the kitchen where he remains on low HP. In the other kitchen, Jay, he gets spotted going inside, and immediately, you know, red team, they get distracted, and he skirts past 2 players on Shack, and he picks off their demo with Slimnish, who, you know, the demo should have been beamed, and Jay, he manages to live on top of that. And as a matter of fact, Angler's med, I swear, he had his beam off everyone for a good few seconds. Like, what are you doing, bro? The remaining Anglers players then attempted to salvage this by picking off skeets, but they failed to do so, unfortunately for them. While capping second, Tristan gets spotted in cheese trying to get a value sniper play and gets pressured back to last, who switches back to soldier, where his medic once again refuses to arrow him when he had the time and position to do so. Just kind of maybe a chip shot at him, you know, he wasn't missing too much health, but it's just these little things that I notice every now and then with the medics. And when you're watching medics to see like how good they play, you kind of have to look out for what their mistakes are rather than what they're doing well. It's kind of like the easiest way to determine how good a medic is, and I just saw so many like mistakes coming off their medics. So Mama's last push gets a good Uber, you know, the gun goes down quick, and Angler's pocket, what's his name, Unicorn Wizard, I'm just gonna call him Wizard, he actually gets a much needed pick on the skis, and his team essentially have the better numbers, but they lose the round anyways, as Ally just gets diffed on the point by Jay, and you know, he backpedals, but he should have held W to stay on the point, as Angler, they were literally a second away, like just frames away from getting their buffed heavy on the point, which would have easily saved that push. And it's kind of Ally's fault, but I'd say it's like also the heavy to blame, who gets slowed down massively by his brass beast. You know, he revs up early, and on top of that, he doesn't even have the gloves that are running urgently on him. Anyway, second mid, Tristan, he beefs a market garden onto skis, who was way too far away anyways for it to possibly connect with him, and down a player, Angler decided to retreat mid, and Mama's Boys decided to play more aggro this time, leaving Jay to cap on mid, and Caps gets some really good damage on 2 jumps on second, and in buy mode he denies Tristan, trying to get around, you know, their team, and all while that's happening, both them was exchanging some pretty good damage on each other, and ultimately Mama's Boys decisively win the battle. And while all that's happening, Wizard manages to get behind and saw, but you know, he's spotted and easily dealt with. At their last, Angler's medic is forced to pop to save Tristan's life since spawns are still coming in, and you know, and Tristan attempts a spoon high 5 in lower lobby, which to me is such a weird angle and option to go for instead of just going for Skis, who was pretty much open in yard. I felt like he had a much better chance at getting that pick. Regardless, Biomod gets a 6 spawn kill on Mig, and pretty much that just wraps up the second round. The next mid was by far Angler's worst mid so far. They actually arrived early since High 5 decides to meme with the shield. Then shit just hits the fan. Tristan dies in the exact same spot as the previous mid, trying to do the exact same thing, and literally a second later, Mig just bombs in the exact same spot and also dies, gets cleaned up immediately. So within the first like 3 seconds of the mid, Angler are already down 2 players. Angler, once again, they just get pressured to their last, where we see more offclassing going on, and for a team getting rolled this hard, I think it's a little strange how much offclassing they do. You could say maybe it's because they're just so hopeless and they just want to meme it. I'm not too sure, but I feel like if you're going against a top invite team, you should play more traditionally. But who am I to speak? I'm not an invite player. Anyways, we got Ali on Sniper, Tristan on Spy. However, Mama's Boys are just too fast getting in that he can't really get a stab on anyone. And he does actually get a stab later on onto High 5, but at that point, the run was pretty much a wrap already. On the 4th mid, Angler decides to run DH on both their soldiers, and they also adjust a bit and decide to play the mid more passively, but quickly lose their positioning as High 5 hits a massive pipe onto their mid, forcing him to saw. And Wizard does a good job denying Caps from finishing his mid off and actually makes good use of his DH, almost getting the Slimish pick as well, and Angler forces Mama Boys to their second, but they quickly bite more than they can chew, trying to match Mama's aggressiveness, and instead get pushed back to mid, and their demo gets separated, who gets picked off by Slimish. Mama's Boys then pop Uber on mid, but don't do anything with it. Meanwhile, Angler is also running crits, and you know, they also do nothing with it, unsurprisingly. And after Uber changes are made, a deathmatch in the kitchen breaks loose, going in favor of Mama's Boys as one would expect. Tristan gets decent salvage, you know, by picking up both Bomb and High 5 in Saw, which gives Angler some momentum to push their Saw. However, they fall flat on their faces, leading to another lost round. And by the last round, everyone is pretty much memeing at this point. High 5's running the sticky jumper, Ali's on soldier, their medic goes pyro. There is no medic, you know, no one on the side of Angler has gone medic, and that's like for the entirety of the mid fight. And by this time, Angler are just throwing themselves one by one at clumps of Mama's Boys players, and it's pretty obvious that they've just given up at this point. So when we look at the logs, what really stands out the most is the scout difference. Jay and Slimnish both had a combined 30, 17, and 5 game to Ali and Mage's 7, 6, and 14. Both scouts on Anglers had negative KDs. Angler scouts were just getting diff so hard, mainly by Slimnish, and the rest of the time they were just soldier food. Angler just seemed really uncoordinated. Even in chaos situations, they just weren't able to out DM Mama's Boys. Also, you know, Angler's medic just had some real game sense issues from what I saw. I mean, Anglerfish never really stood a chance, but I feel like there's a huge room for improvement. So for me, the player of the game was Slimnish, who led his team in kills at 400 DPM, and he led his team in assists, and he also had the lowest deaths for any damage class. So I think he pretty decisively gets this. Just watching the match, he just did a lot more, in my opinion. Although to be fair, Jay was spending a lot of his time capping, and when I'm going off player rankings, you know, I'm going off a match by match basis, and in this match, Slimnish was the best player, I would say, by a sliver. Alright, so now that that's wrapped up, I'm going to give my player of the week. To me, it's Alexandros. Yeah, in a vacuum, Slimnish clears both Alexandros and Side Guy, but to clarify, I'm just going on individual performances, so, you know, I can show appreciation to those who deserve it, while Slimnish... But to clarify, I'm just going on individual performances, so, you know, I can show... But to clarify, I'm just going on... But to clarify, I am just going on individual performances so I can show appreciation to those who deserve it. And while Slumdish did have a monster 400 DPM game, his value picks were not nearly as good as Alexandros's, and he didn't get a single force compared to Alexandros's several forces. So, and sure, scouts naturally get fewer forces than soldiers, but even adjusting for role expectations, Alexandros was pulling way more forces than you'd reasonably expect. Like, he was farming them, and as well as med drops. So, or not drops, med kills. So, you know. As well as med kills. And I'm not sure if I need to state the obvious. Alexandros had a better soldier performance than Saigai did. So let me get into my power rankings this week. Just a heads up, the list is fluid and subject to change as the weeks go by. So at the very bottom of the list, we have Anglerfish. Up to this point, they're 0-3 in matches and have only converted a single round in 3 weeks. At 7, I've got Ninjago, who are also 0-3 in matches with a single round converted, but from the eye test, I feel like they played less sloppy in my opinion. At number 6, I have Palace Cats, who beat Ninjago in a gentleman's sweep, but they got swept the next 2 weeks, putting them at 1-2 in matches. At 5, I have Global Clan, who thus far only played 2 matches, winning their last against Anglerfish, and putting up somewhat of a decent fight against a much better Fjord Gaming with a loss, albeit it was 5-2, so they do have some fight in them. And at 4, I have their opponent Fjord Gaming themselves, who took losses to both Froyo and Mama's Boys, and set at a steady 2-2 record. At 3, I have Jiminy, and am I crazy to put them beneath Froyo? And to some Mama's Boys, I don't think so. I mean, they haven't played each other yet, so I can only go off teams they face. But against Ninjago, Froyo looked more clinical, closing out rounds faster, dropping fewer mids, and giving Ninjago less room to work with. While, you know, Jiminy's numbers are solid, but some of that comes from like longer, messier games where the opponent was just, they're just able to make things scrappier. So additionally, Froyo's wins versus Ninjago were also away, while Jiminy played theirs at home. So until they go head to head, Froyo's cleaner control puts them slightly ahead for now. But, you know, because of their currently flawless record in both rounds dropped in total wins, they basically just clear everyone else they put below them. And at 2, I have Froyotech. Not much to be said here that I haven't said already. We'll see how they perform with Habib on Soldier and Vanny back on Combo Scout. And at number 1 is Mama's Boys, who gentlemen swept Froyo on Bagel and beat Fjord by a cleaner margin. And as a week 2A, they set at a super comfortable 3-0 record. And unless Froyo can fix their communication issues, I actually have them as pretty decisive favorites to win it all this season. So thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next week. Maybe. We'll see. Let's see how this does. Take care, y'all.